You know, we can prove historically that the tomb was empty.
For over 2,000 years, the mystery of Jesus' tomb has fascinated historians, scientists, and believers alike.
For over 2,000 years, have flocked to this place to celebrate the climax event from all of history.
Now, after centuries of speculation, scientists have made an astonishing discovery, and from the look of things, this discovery could change everything we thought we knew about the Christian faith. These experts have opened the tomb for the first time in recorded history, and what they found has left the world in awe. But what did they find inside? And how does this discovery change our understanding of the biblical past? Stay tuned, because what we're about to reveal is sure to shock you to your core.
For 60 hours last week, the slab was pulled back to allow scientists and National Geographic to have a look. The inside of the tomb, where many believe Jesus was resurrected, has never been filmed.
How Jesus' tomb was discovered and its significance in religion today. For many years, people have talked about the place where Jesus was buried. Stories from the Bible say that after Jesus was crucified, he was taken down from the cross and placed in a tomb. This tomb, according to the scriptures, belonged to a man named Joseph of Arimathea. He was a wealthy man who believed in Jesus and wanted to give him a proper burial.
Okay, so we're just behind the tomb of Jesus here, and we have these what are called kolkim.
The Bible says the tomb was carved into rock, and after Jesus' body was placed inside, a large stone was rolled in front of the entrance to seal it. The story also says that 3 days later, the tomb was found empty, and Jesus had risen from the dead.
Also admit the tomb was empty. They never say the tomb was empty. They say the body was stolen.
Right.
Well, say the body was stolen.
Because of this, the tomb became a very important part of Christian belief. But over time, people were not sure exactly where the tomb was. Wars, destruction, and changes in history made it hard to know the exact location. Scientists, archaeologists, and religious experts spent many years searching for it. And after a long time, they finally found what they believe is Jesus' tomb. The tomb was discovered in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is a very old church in Jerusalem. This church has been a holy place for Christians for many centuries because people believe that it was built on the same spot where Jesus was buried and resurrected. The church itself has a long history. It was built in the 4th century by Emperor Constantine, who was the first Roman emperor to become a Christian. His mother, Empress Helena, traveled to Jerusalem to find the places mentioned in the Bible, including Jesus' tomb. When she arrived, she asked the local people where Jesus was buried. Many pointed to a site that was under a Roman temple built by Emperor Hadrian. Constantine ordered that the temple be destroyed, and underneath it, they found a tomb carved into rock. They believed this was Jesus' tomb, so they built a large church over it. Over the years, the church was damaged and rebuilt many times, but people always believed that inside it was the tomb of Jesus. For many centuries, the tomb remained a sacred place for Christians all over the world. But over time, parts of the tomb were covered by marble to protect it. People could no longer see the original rock or the inside of the tomb. It remained sealed for hundreds of years. Then, in 2016, everything changed. A team of scientists and archaeologists was given permission to open the tomb and study it using modern technology. This was a very big moment in history because it was the first time in many centuries that people could see what was inside. The team of experts worked very carefully because they knew they were handling something very important. When they removed the marble slabs, they found layers of rock and an ancient limestone burial bed, which was the place where Jesus' body was believed to have been laid. This discovery was exciting for both scientists and religious people because it gave them a chance to learn more about the history of Jesus' burial. Now, why exactly is this tomb so important in the first place? Well, theologians believe that Jesus' tomb is one of the most famous places in the world, not just because it is believed to be where he was buried, but because of what happened before and after his burial. Jesus died by crucifixion, which was one of the worst ways to die in ancient times. The Romans used it to punish criminals and enemies of the state and made examples of them so others would be too afraid to challenge their power. They would leave the crucified people hanging on a wooden cross for hours or even days until they could no longer breathe. People passing by would see the person dying slowly, mocking them, and the Romans wanted everyone to know that this was the price of defying their rule. But Jesus was not a criminal. He was not a thief or a murderer. He was a man who preached love, kindness, and forgiveness. His followers believed he was the Son of God, the Messiah who had come to save them. Yet instead of being welcomed as a king, he was arrested, beaten, and sentenced to death like a common criminal. His death did not make sense to those who followed him. If he was truly the Son of God, why would he suffer like this? Why would he allow himself to be treated so cruelly? After his death, something even more mysterious happened. Normally, when someone died on a cross, their body was left there for animals to eat or was thrown into a common grave. But Jesus' body was taken down and placed in a proper tomb. Joseph of Arimathea, who we had mentioned earlier, secretly believed in Jesus and asked for permission to bury him in a new rock-cut tomb. This was unusual because criminals did not get such an honor. Yet Jesus was buried in a rich man's tomb, wrapped in linen and placed inside. A large stone was rolled in front of the entrance to seal it. What made the tomb important, however, was not just the fact that Jesus was buried in it, it was what happened next. According to the Gospels, when some of his followers came to visit the tomb 3 days later, they found it empty. The massive stone had been rolled away and Jesus' body was gone. Then reports started spreading that Jesus had risen from the dead. People said they saw him alive, walking, talking, and even eating with them.
Teacher?
Go and tell our brothers. I am here.
This was not just 1 or 2 people. His disciples, other followers, and even those who had doubted him claimed to have seen him alive after he had been buried. If the tomb had remained sealed with his body inside, the story of Jesus might have ended there. But because the tomb was empty, it became a symbol of hope, faith, and the promise of resurrection. Seeing how important this tomb was to religious sects, and curious to find out if it was actually real, scientists used many different methods to study the tomb. They used special tools to scan the inside without damaging anything. They also used carbon dating, a method that helps determine the age of ancient materials. Their research confirmed that the tomb was indeed very old, dating back to the time when Jesus lived. This was an important discovery because it matched the historical timeline of Jesus' crucifixion and burial. Even though the tomb had been rebuilt and modified over the years, the original burial site was still there, hidden under the layers of stone. This gave researchers more confidence that the site was authentic. The discovery also allowed them to preserve the tomb properly so that it would not be damaged in the future. The reopening of Jesusostom was not just an important moment for science, but also for religion. For Christians, the tomb is one of the holiest places in the world. It is the place where they believe the most important event in history happened, which was the resurrection of Jesus. The belief that Jesus rose from the dead is the foundation of Christianity. It is the reason why Christians celebrate Easter and why they believe in life after death. Seeing the tomb confirmed for many that their faith was connected to real history. Many pilgrims from different countries visit the Church of the Holy Sepulchre every year to pray at the tomb and feel closer to their faith. That's not all. The significance of the tomb in religion today goes beyond just being a historical site. It is a symbol of hope, faith, and the promise of eternal life. Christians believe that Jesus' resurrection showed that death is not the end, and this belief gives them strength in difficult times. The tomb reminds them of God's power and the sacrifice that Jesus made for humanity. It is also a place that unites Christians from different backgrounds and denominations. Even though there are many branches of Christianity, such as Catholics, Protestants, and Orthodox Christians, they all recognize the importance of Jesus' tomb. This makes it a powerful place of unity in the Christian world. The discovery of the tomb also helps people understand history better. Many people wonder about real places mentioned in the Bible, and finding evidence of these locations makes these stories more tangible. Even though faith does not need physical proof, seeing the tomb helps many believers feel a deeper connection to their religion. It also helps historians learn more about how ancient people buried their dead and how religious sites were preserved over time. The study of Jesus' tomb provides valuable knowledge about the past and the traditions that shape Christianity. The discovery of Jesus' tomb also brings attention to the importance of preserving historical and religious sites. Over time, wars, natural disasters, and human activity have damaged many sacred places. The restoration of the tomb in 2016 showed how important it is to protect these sites so that future generations can learn from them. Scientists and religious leaders worked together to make sure the tomb was preserved without altering its sacredness. They even had to do some reconstruction, but what exactly was done to restore the tomb to a semblance of what it must have originally looked like? Keep watching to find out. The reconstruction of Jesus' tomb over the years. As expected, Jesus' tomb has gone through many changes over the centuries. Since the time it was first identified as the burial site of Jesus, it has been damaged, rebuilt, restored, and carefully preserved. To understand how the tomb has changed, we must look back through history and examine each period of reconstruction that has shaped it into what it is today. The history of Jesus' tomb as a religious site began in the early 4th century AD, when Emperor Constantine the Great ordered the construction of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Before that, the tomb was hidden under a Roman temple dedicated to Venus, which was built by Emperor Hadrian around 135 AD. Constantine's mother, Empress Helena, traveled to Jerusalem in 326 AD and led the search for Christian holy sites. According to historical records, she identified the tomb, and construction of the church began soon after. To build the church, Constantine's workers had to remove Hadrian's temple and dig into the rock beneath it to expose what was believed to be Jesus' burial site. Once the tomb was uncovered, a shrine known as the Edicule was built around it to protect it. This was the first major reconstruction of the tomb, and it set the foundation for everything that would come after. But the original Edicule did not last long. In 614 AD, the Persian army invaded Jerusalem and destroyed much of the city, including parts of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The tomb itself was damaged but not completely destroyed. The Byzantine Emperor Heraclius later took back Jerusalem, and by the early 7th century, the church and the Edicule were rebuilt. This marked the second major reconstruction of Jesus' tomb, showing that even in times of war, people were determined to preserve this sacred place. One of the most devastating moments in the tomb's history happened in the year 1009 AD, when the Fatimid Caliph al-Hakim, bi-Amr Allah, ordered the complete destruction of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. His soldiers tore down the church and the Edicule, leaving almost nothing behind. This was one of the worst attacks on the tomb in history, and for a time it seemed as though it was lost forever. Despite this, Christian leaders did not give up on rebuilding it. In 1048 AD, the Byzantine Emperor Constantine IX Monomachos sponsored the reconstruction of the church, including the Edicule. This was an important moment in history because it showed that even after nearly complete destruction, the tomb could be restored. The new structure was smaller than the original, but it still served as a place of worship for Christians from all over the world. This reconstruction allowed the tomb to survive into the next centuries, even as it continued to face more damage from wars and natural disasters. In the 12th century, during the time of the Crusades, the tomb underwent another significant reconstruction. When Christian forces took control of Jerusalem in 1099 AD, they found the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in poor condition. The Crusaders, who saw the tomb as one of the most important sites in Christianity, began a major restoration effort. By 1149 AD, they had built a much larger and stronger version of the church, which included a new edicule over the tomb. This version of the church and tomb structure lasted for many years, although it continued to suffer from small damages and occasional repairs. The Crusaders' reconstruction ensured that the tomb remained a key religious site for Christians around the world. Even after Muslim forces retook Jerusalem, the church and the tomb were mostly left standing, although there were occasional threats to its survival. As mentioned earlier, over the following centuries, natural disasters became the biggest threat to Jesus' tomb. Earthquakes were especially damaging, causing cracks and structural weaknesses in the edicule. In 1546 AD, an earthquake struck Jerusalem, damaging parts of the church and tomb. Another earthquake in 1808 AD caused even more serious destruction, leading to a fire that burned parts of the edicule. After this disaster, a major reconstruction project took place in 1810 AD. This was one of the most extensive restorations in history, as the entire edicule had to be rebuilt to prevent further collapse. The new structure was made using reinforced materials and remained standing for over a century. However, by the 20th century, it had started to weaken again, and scientists realized another restoration would be necessary. By the 1940s, the edicule was in bad condition. Cracks had formed in the walls, and parts of the structure were at risk of falling apart. In 1947, British officials placed metal supports around the edicule to prevent it from collapsing. But these were meant to be temporary. For decades, religious groups debated how to properly restore the tomb without damaging its sacred nature. It wasn't until 2016 that a full-scale restoration finally took place. Scientists, engineers, and religious leaders came together for the first time in centuries to carefully study and restore the tomb. In October 2016, they temporarily removed the marble covering of the tomb, allowing researchers to see inside for the first time in modern history. The team used advanced technology to scan and document the site while carefully reinforcing the ethical structure. The restoration was completed in March 2017, making the tomb safer and more stable for future generations. Apart from its religious significance, the tomb also reveals a story told through its design, which is a combination of ancient Jewish traditions, early Christian devotion, and centuries of preservation and change. These physical elements of the tomb speak to both its historical past and its spiritual symbolism, making it a powerful site where faith and history intertwine. Architecturally, the tomb shares key design elements with other first-century Jewish burial sites. When the tomb was first uncovered in the 4th century by Emperor Constantine's orders, it matched the style of rock-cut tombs commonly used in Jerusalem during Jesus' time. These tombs typically featured a small entrance leading to a larger inner chamber, with carved shelves or niches along the walls. These niches, known as kokim, were long, narrow spaces where bodies were laid to rest. Families would place the deceased inside these slots, and after the flesh decayed, they would gather the bones and store them in an ossuary, which is a stone box for keeping the tomb ready for future use by other family members. Jesus' tomb followed a similar layout, but with one key difference. It included a special burial bed, also carved out of limestone. This flat surface, cut directly from the rock, is believed to be the spot where Jesus' body was placed after his death. According to the Gospels, Joseph of Arimathea, a wealthy follower of Jesus, offered his own unused tomb for Jesus' burial. The fact that the tomb had a burial bed instead of multiple kokim suggests it may have been intended as a single private tomb, which was fitting for a man like Joseph, who could afford a more elaborate resting place. The burial bed itself is also very spiritually significant for Christians. It is seen as the exact spot where Jesus' body lay for 3 days before his resurrection. This simple slab of stone becomes more than just a physical object. For believers, it represents the moment when death was defeated, when Jesus rose again, and when the promise of eternal life was made real. Every year, thousands of pilgrims kneel before the stone, touching it, praying and weeping, not because of the stone itself, but because of what it symbolizes. To them, it is not just a rock, it is a bridge between death and life, despair and hope. Over the centuries, layers of marble were added to the burial bed and other parts of the tomb. These marble slabs were not part of the original design, but they served their own symbolic purpose. The first layer was placed over the burial bed as early as the 14th century to protect it from the constant touch of pilgrims. More layers were added during later restorations, especially in the 16th and 19th centuries, each meant to preserve the sacred site while also serving as an indicator of the passage of time. Spiritually, the design of the tomb reflects the journey of faith itself. The small, humble entrance represents the need for believers to approach God with humility. The inner chamber with its burial bed symbolizes death and a place of sorrow and finality. But for Christians, this tomb is not the end of the story. The empty burial bed serves as a symbol of resurrection and a reminder that death was not the final word for Jesus, and by extension, for those who follow him. The darkness of the tomb gives way to the light of the risen Christ, and this transformation from death to life is at the very core of Christian faith. The layers of marble, the intricate carvings on the edicule, and the flickering candles all add to this spiritual symbolism. They show that the tomb is not just a place of history, but a living symbol of faith. Every detail, from the way the burial bed is protected to the way the entrance humbles visitors, carries meaning. It is a physical space that points to a spiritual reality, reminding all who enter that what matters most is not the stone itself, but the hope it represents. Now, we have established the fact that this tomb, which is located in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, is Jesus. But there are certain people who did not feel the same way at first. They didn't believe that the tomb was actually authentic. Stick around to find out why there were controversies regarding the tomb being genuine. Controversies and debates regarding the authenticity of the tomb. While millions of people visit Jesus' tomb each year, there has always been an ongoing debate about whether this site is truly the actual burial place of Jesus. Over the centuries, scholars, historians, archaeologists, and religious leaders have discussed, argued, and questioned its authenticity, leading to many controversies. These debates have brought up curiosity and at times division as people struggle to balance faith, history, and science. The controversy began as early as the 4th century AD, when Emperor Constantine the Great ordered the construction of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Like we mentioned earlier, Constantine's mother, Empress Helena, traveled to Jerusalem in 326 AD to search for Christian holy sites, and it was she who identified the location of the tomb. According to historical accounts, she claimed to have been guided by visions and local traditions, and when Hadrian's Roman temple was torn down, a rock-cut tomb was found beneath it. This tomb was declared to be the burial place of Jesus. But even at the time, there were questions about how Helena could be so sure that this was the right place. Some critics argued that too much time had passed, nearly 300 years since Jesus' death, and that memories, oral traditions, and landmarks could have been mistaken or lost. The site might have been chosen more for convenience or political reasons rather than historical accuracy. In the centuries that followed, the authenticity of the tomb faced further scrutiny. One of the most significant challenges came in the 19th century when archaeologists began using more scientific methods to study ancient sites. Some questioned whether the tomb of Jesus, as identified by Helena, matched the descriptions found in the Bible. According to the Gospels, Jesus' tomb was located outside the walls of Jerusalem in a garden and belonged to a wealthy man named Joseph of Arimathea. But when researchers studied the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, they found it was inside the modern city walls. This raised a major question: how could the tomb be authentic if it was not located outside the city, as the Bible described? Supporters of the tomb's authenticity argue that the city walls of Jerusalem have changed over time. They explain that the tomb was indeed outside the walls during Jesus' time, but the city expanded in the centuries that followed, enclosing the site within its new boundaries. Archaeologists have discovered ancient walls dating back to the 1st century, suggesting the area where the church now stands was once on the outskirts of the city. Despite this explanation, skeptics continue to doubt whether the tomb matches the biblical description, keeping the debate alive. Things don't end there. Another source of controversy is the existence of other tombs that have been linked to Jesus over the years. In 1980, a discovery in the East Talpiot neighborhood of Jerusalem added fuel to the debate. Archaeologists uncovered a tomb containing several ossuaries which held bones with inscriptions bearing names like Jesus, son of Joseph, Mary, and Joseph. Some scholars and media outlets quickly speculated that this might be the real family tomb of Jesus. The discovery was the focus of a 2007 documentary titled The Lost Tomb of Jesus, which suggested that Jesus was buried there alongside his family, challenging the idea of his resurrection. But many archaeologists and religious leaders criticized these claims. They argued that the names found in the Talpiot tomb were common during Jesus' time, making it unlikely that the tomb belonged to his family. Critics also pointed out that the documentary relied heavily on speculation and lacks solid evidence. Despite this, the Talpiot tomb remains a controversial topic, with some believing it raises valid questions about whether the Church of the Holy Sepulchre truly houses Jesus' tomb. Another debate centers on whether the tomb has been altered too much over time to still be considered authentic. Since its discovery by Constantine, the tomb has been rebuilt, damaged, and restored many times due to wars, earthquakes, and fires. The edicule itself was destroyed and reconstructed repeatedly, most recently in 2016. Critics argue that with so much rebuilding, the original tomb may no longer exist in its true form. They question whether the site now represents a place of faith rather than an actual historical location. Supporters counter this by saying that the site's significance is not just in its physical structure, but in what it represents for believers. Even if parts of the tomb have changed, they argue, the spot where Jesus was believed to be buried has remained constant, and its spiritual importance outweighs any changes to the stones or walls surrounding it. For many, faith and tradition hold more weight than scientific proof. To complicate this debate even more, multiple Christian denominations became involved, each with its own stake in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The church is shared by the Greek Orthodox, Roman Catholic, and Armenian Apostolic churches, along with smaller groups like the Coptic, Syriac, and Ethiopian Orthodox churches. These religious communities have long-standing rivalries over control of the tomb, and disagreements about how it should be maintained and restored have sometimes turned into heated conflicts. In some cases, tensions have become so intense that physical fights have broken out between clergy members. These internal struggles have led some to question whether the focus has shifted away from the tomb's historical authenticity and more toward religious politics. Despite the controversies, scientific research has played an important role in recent years. The 2016 restoration allowed scientists to study the tomb like never before. When the marble slab covering the burial bed was briefly removed, researchers discovered the original rock surface believed to be where Jesus' body was laid. Tests confirmed that the tomb dates back at least to the 4th century, which aligns with Constantine's time, and possibly even earlier. While this does not prove that the site is definitely Jesus' tomb, it adds weight to the argument that it has been venerated as such for many centuries. Today, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre continues to be a major pilgrimage site. People from all over the world travel to Jerusalem to visit the tomb and experience its spiritual presence. Many say that standing in front of the tomb is a deeply emotional experience. Some pray silently, while others light candles or touch the stone. It is a place where people feel close to Jesus and reflect on his life and teachings. The church itself is also an incredible place filled with history. It has many chapels, altars, and ancient relics that tell the story of Christianity. Walking through it is like stepping back in time to the days when Jesus walked the earth. Ultimately, the controversy over the authenticity of Jesus' tomb remains unresolved. For some, the historical and archaeological evidence does not provide enough proof that the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is the true site of Jesus' burial. For others, faith and tradition are more important than scientific certainty. What is clear is that the tomb's significance goes beyond the question of whether it is the exact burial site of Jesus. It represents centuries of faith, devotion, and history, bringing people together from all walks of life. The debates about its authenticity will likely continue for many years to come, but they only add to the tomb's fascinating history. As long as people seek to understand the past and hold on to their beliefs, the tomb of Jesus, whether real or symbolic, will remain one of the most important and awe-inspiring sites in the world. Well, what do you think about the tomb? Do you believe it is truly the site where Jesus was buried? Let us know in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.